The Madden-Julian oscillation has shifted into phase 8, so we're getting into a progressively more favorable pattern for cold weather in the central and western U.S. However, this weekend, we are looking at a risk of a tornado outbreak in the deep south for tomorrow. Let's head right to that surface chart for this afternoon, and it does look very much like a springtime pattern, or at least a very late winter pattern. We do have plenty of cold air up to the north, temperatures below zero up in the Canadian prairies, but a strong Pacific weather system on the move. Strong westerly winds through the southwestern deserts, a risk for blowing dust in West Texas, and a meager return flow starting to set up across Texas and Oklahoma, and that will increase substantially overnight. We go up to the 850 millibar chart about 5,000 feet, and things are actually pretty busy up there, 50 to 60 knot flow across Kansas. Then during the overnight hours, a veered low-level jet running from about Dallas to the Ozarks, 50 to 60 knot flow. Then as we get into morning, a large corridor of 50 to 60 knot flow moving into the lower Mississippi River Valley, and that will set the stage for a severe weather outbreak in that part of the country. We do see the 850 millibar cold front emerging from West Texas. There's the 850 millibar warm front, and this whole region out here, this is a large warm sector, favorable for severe weather. We'll discuss that a little bit more, but let's look at the weather region by region, starting with the northeast under a 1036 millibar high centered near Buffalo. The satellite imagery showing clear to partly cloudy skies across that part of the country. Cold air advection continues from New York up to Quebec. Temperatures this afternoon ranged from the teens in Maine and northern New England to the 30s in the northeast corridor, Pennsylvania, Ohio, 30s there, with 40s in Virginia. Where do we start with this? Well, lake effect snow warning in the Lake Ontario snow belt that extends all the way down to Syracuse, runs into about 1 a.m. Winter storm warning has been issued for much of Vermont, New Hampshire, and northern New York. That just came out, and that runs Saturday evening, Sunday and Monday. Could be up to a foot of snow there. Large winter weather advisory down the Appalachians and further south from Pittsburgh to Kentucky, Tennessee. We have a flood watch all weekend that goes as far north as Zanesville and even Cincinnati. 2 to 4 inches of rain possible within that flood watch. And as you get into the higher terrain of the Shenandoahs, we've got both a flood watch and a winter weather advisory, so some significant problems there in the higher terrain. In the Great Lakes and Midwest, temperatures remained in the 20s. In the Great Lakes region, 30s farther south. A large winter weather advisory was posted for all of the central Great Lakes area, western and central Michigan into Wisconsin, southeast Minnesota, and northeastern Iowa. That runs through Saturday evening. We're expecting about 3 inches of snow around Des Moines, mixed precipitation, 3 to 5 inches into Milwaukee and into central Michigan. And these are the total forecast snow amounts from the National Digital Forecast Database all the way through the weekend. A track of 7 inches, maybe from northern Iowa to Green Bay, then across Lake Huron, across the Toronto area, and into the Adirondacks. So much of New England getting at least 5 inches, and quite a bit more up there in northern Maine. In the southeastern states, you can see both ridging and warm advection on the backside. This is the start of return flow from the Gulf. And if you actually look out there in the Gulf, you can see those cloud streets forming up right there, transporting that moisture northward. So we're going to be looking for an atmospheric river developing in this part of the country. We saw a mix of cold and hot weather. Temperatures ranged from the 40s in the Piedmont region to the mid-80s in southern Florida, specifically Miami to Fort Myers, ahead of this front right here Those temperatures ahead of that front, we're running about 85 to 86. And as we mentioned, that flood watch in the Appalachians, nothing there right now, but things will be going downhill. And for tomorrow, enhanced risk of severe weather from the Storm Prediction Center that runs from northwestern Louisiana into much of Mississippi, all the way up to Memphis. There is the potential for a few tornadoes up to EF2 and higher, but that will rapidly aggregate later in the day into a squall line. Doesn't look like a situation that will extend much into the evening. However, there could be some nighttime severe weather episodes in southeastern Mississippi. We can show you the progression of things overnight into tomorrow with the HRW model. You can see that warm advection start to bring up some cells later tonight. This is about 8 p.m. So a few thunderstorms and showers do get going in the lower Mississippi River Valley. Then we hit the dawn hours. Up near the front, some cells developing already, and we're going to watch that warm sector right in here as we get the heating, the continued destabilization, and we're going to see a few cells out ahead of that line. There they are, about 3 p.m. This is not exactly how it's going to play out, but this is kind of the stuff you want to be alert for. So anywhere in Mississippi, northeastern Louisiana, we'll have to keep an eye on those cells in that environment because there will be some strongly curved photographs, and those could become severe. If you remember that 2011 outbreak where we had tornadoes in Philadelphia, Mississippi, and Hacklersburg and all that, it was a similar situation, obviously a lot more severe than this. But we do see this evolution quite a bit in the springtime. Cells out ahead of the line, and along the line itself, we can see some QLCS tornadoes, in other words, quasi-linear convective system tornadoes, or basically spin-ups along the squall line. And gradually things become strongly forced around 9 p.m., 10 p.m. However, for the most part, it looks like the instability does diminish. Looking at the southern plains, and outgoing polar air mass still remain anchored across East Texas. The warm advection beginning to get established on top of that cold dome. Temperatures ranged from the 50s in Tulsa to the 50s in the lower Rio Grande Valley. But we do find 60s and 70s out in West Texas ahead of that cold front. Blowing dust advisories are in effect for all of the El Paso region into southeastern Arizona as well. The blowing dust advisory includes Las Cruces, Deming, and Alamogordo. Southwest winds gusting to 55 miles an hour this afternoon. Wind advisories across the Trans-Pecos into far west Texas on Saturday. So we'll see a continuation of this windy weather. High wind warnings are in effect above 5,000 feet, could be 65 mile an hour gusts there. In the panhandles, especially around Clayton, Raton, Trinidad into northeast New Mexico, wind advisories and high wind warnings. Southwest winds up to 65 miles an hour, dying down late this afternoon. And we've got wind advisories across southern Kansas out to the Wichita area where south winds could gust to 50 miles an hour. In the northern plains, North Dakota remained firmly in the icebox today. Single-digit temperatures across the state this afternoon, teens and 20s from Minnesota and Wisconsin into South Dakota. As we mentioned, winter weather advisories into tomorrow in central Iowa and southeastern Minnesota, including Minneapolis. They're expecting 2 to 3 inches, ending tonight. No problems in the North Plains proper except for that cold weather. But as we get into the high plains, central Montana, winter weather advisory this afternoon into tomorrow morning around Havre, Lewiston, and Great Falls, 2 to 4 inches of snow with 6 inches in the higher elevations. In the Rockies, we've seen a warm-up. Denver expecting 60 degrees this afternoon, widespread 60s across southeastern Colorado. In the mountains, we saw a mix of 30s and 40s. So this precipitation here is a mix of rain and snow. Winter storm warnings posted along and west of the Continental Divide through Saturday evening. mostly above 8,000 feet. That includes Aspen and the San Juan Mountains. 8 to 16 inches of snow expected over the next 24 hours. In the higher valley floors of the Colorado Rockies, winter weather advisories down to about 7,000, where 4 to 9 inches of snow is expected. In the southwestern region, warm temperatures in the deserts, low 70s, but those temperatures rapidly fall off with elevation. We're looking at, 35 degrees at Flagstaff right now, and this is enough to support snow up above 6,000 to 7,000 feet. This afternoon, we have winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings in northern New Mexico. That's mostly above 8,000 feet, up to 1 foot of snow possible. Winter weather advisories on Interstate 40 around the Gallup area, up to 3 inches expected overnight, then clearing up in the morning. As we mentioned, blowing dust problems from the Continental Divide all the way to Benson, Arizona. The Mogollon Rim under a winter weather advisory today from Show Low to Flagstaff and Williams, mostly above 6,500 feet, about 1 to 2 inches of snow possible. The Grand Canyon North Rim under a winter storm warning, 4 to 6 inches today. Winter storm warnings through the mountains of Utah, winter weather advisories in northeastern Nevada. And then moving out to California, we still have a winter storm warning in effect. Those continue into mid-evening for elevations above 6,000 feet. Up to 1 foot of additional snow is possible. And we do have those flood watches down in the lower elevations. The Mojave Desert under a wind advisory early this evening. West winds could be gusting up to 50 miles an hour. The San Bernardino Range, the Tehachapi Pass area, high wind warnings are in effect. Frost advisories as we get into the central inland California coast area, including King City and Greenfield. Temperatures could be down to 32 this evening. Winter weather advisories across northern Idaho through the remainder of this evening, and in the Cascades, only looking for a couple of inches of additional snow. Winter storm warnings have been dropped for eastern Idaho, but they continue in the Jackson, Wyoming area. And of course, on days like this, I question whether we really need to be going through each and every advisory, watch, and warning. There's so many to cover, and I know a lot of you want to get onto the forecasting material, so I'm going to find a way to kind of condense that as we go into future episodes. If you have any comments about that, please post here on YouTube. Then we take our obligatory trip out into the Pacific. And yeah, there is another Gulf of Alaska system lined up. We head up into Alaska, no major problems, but there are blizzard warnings in effect through the Brooks Range. One in the White Mountains just dropped off. The eastern North Slope area also under a blizzard warning until tomorrow morning. Temperatures very cold through that area, and you can see that there is a cold bubble covering much of western Alaska this afternoon. We have a ridge extending from the Beaufort Sea into Alberta, so that is a continued axis of cold air. Temperatures down to -20, -30, perpetuating this cold polar air mass regime. And we see those sub-zero temperatures extending all the way to the U.S. border. Arctic outflow coming through British Columbia, kicking those winds around to the east and driving them offshore. So some very cold temperatures out there around Juneau down to Prince Rupert. Then heading into eastern Canada, a very strong low-pressure area in the Maritimes, 980 millibar low there north of St. John. We have snowfall warnings extending from Labrador all the way into northwestern Newfoundland. And they're expecting a second punch of winter weather into the Montreal area for Sunday night and Monday. Snowfall there could be anywhere from 6 to 15 inches. And let's take a look at those upper air dynamics because we haven't really looked at this yet. Our eyes are drawn into the southwest deserts, a jet max running through California into Arizona. The divergent left front quadrant across the Four Corners, helping to produce that snow shower activity out there from Show Low to Flagstaff. As we go into the overnight hours, this upper air energy approaches Texas and rapidly moves into North Texas, the Red River region, the Dallas area around noon, and towards evening, approaching Arkansas, Shreveport, and destabilizing the air mass through that region. As we go through the overnight hours, that trough continues to progress eastward, replaced by ridging across much of the western part of the country. Meanwhile, on the East Coast, upper air dynamics lifting into the northeastern U.S., so could be a messy situation up there for much of Sunday and Monday. Some generalized troughing going into early next week. The next major system appears to be two of them, one up there in the northern plains for Tuesday, another one diving into the base of the trough for Tuesday and Wednesday. And they appear to come in a phase right there. Deepening of this trough across the central U.S. as cold advection floods southward. And here's another potent trough moving through Nevada on Thursday. That's entering the base of the trough and amplifying just a little bit. Here comes another trough. Starts to get a little bit busy out there in the western U.S., but we're getting so far out that we don't really know exactly what each of these troughs are going to do. But we're looking at anything from an increase in clouds to areas of showers and precipitation to frontogenesis if they interact with a low-level boundary. And the other big question is what's going on with that Arctic air? You don't find too many charts on the internet that address this, but we do that here. So you're looking at the surface temperatures. The aqua is about minus 10 to minus 20 Fahrenheit. The oranges get towards minus 30 to minus 40. Orange is pretty significant. Aqua, it's pretty significant if it makes it into the northern U.S. So let's go forward into the weekend. We see regeneration of Arctic air across southern Nunavut and Manitoba. A nose of very cold air moving into the Dakotas for Saturday. This slug of orange starts to make its move south, only driven by 1045 millibars, so not really a substantial push behind it, but it does ooze into the Dakotas for Monday and Tuesday. Oranges coming into North Dakota, so we're going to be seeing some very cold overnight lows. And I don't want to talk in general terms. These are the forecast overnight lows from the National Digital Forecast Database. This is not models. This is, to a certain extent, models combined with National Weather Service forecaster input. So we start out Sunday morning, blows down to minus 18 in North Dakota, but take a look at Monday morning, down to minus 30, minus 38 up there north of Minot. So this is some brutally cold air. And for Monday night into Tuesday, more of the same. Lots of minus 30s all the way from Bismarck up to the northwestern corner of North Dakota. So it's kind of fortunate that's not coming all the way south with a big 1060 millibar push, because that could really get the rest of us into trouble. So that's why the aquas are significant in the northern plains, and oranges even more so. So this is that chunk of cold air coming south. We see some moderation up to the north. The return of pinks up there in northern Canada for Wednesday. So things start to back off a little bit going into late next week. The oranges return across the high Arctic for next weekend, but that appears to push mostly into the Hudson Bay region. You can see the pressures back there are very lackluster, 10 to 1015 millibars. So that's probably not coming south. Okay, it's time to get that forecast set up for you. Here's our Pacific weather system. Here's our Canadian weather system. So they're going to blend together. And you're going to see that take place here overnight and into tomorrow. So we start out Saturday morning, that strong warm advection priming the lower Mississippi River Valley, the Arklatex, and we will see those storms going up during the afternoon. And there they are. That's 6 p.m. Severe weather situation underway from Memphis down to Monroe, Shreveport, and possibly over to Jackson a little bit later. Arctic air flowing south. Freezing rain and sleet from basically Toledo Cleveland over to Pittsburgh, and that will lift north with this warm advection. Typically, we see it change over the other way from rain to snow in the cold advection region, like you see right here. So it really depends on what side of that low pressure area you're in. So you can basically follow your favorite area going into tomorrow night. Another Pacific system moving into Seattle and Portland. Then we go into Sunday. We're seeing a big chunk of that polar air pushing into the northern plains. Highs on Sunday will be in the single digits from Minnesota into northwestern Iowa. Teens into the Quad Cities, Kansas City, and Omaha. In Ohio, western Pennsylvania, and western New York will see that rain changing over to snow during the day on Sunday. And we could see snow further south into Kentucky, but it looks like things are starting to dry out there and they're getting that subsidence in the wake of that weather system. A marginal risk of severe weather from the Carolinas coast into northern Florida along that cold front. Extensive snow in the northern Rockies as another weather system crosses the mountains and approaches that Canadian ridge. Then for Monday, we're getting into some bitter cold up there in North Dakota, as we mentioned. Highs around -10 at Bismarck, lows about -30. So that's certainly some stout Arctic air, but it's just not coming all the way south like we sometimes see. Precipitation in the northeastern U.S. diminishes, but cold air reaches the northeastern U.S., highs in the teens and lower 20s in upstate New York. This other wave starts dropping down the frontal boundary. Most of it's elevated, but we will see some snow showers reaching into Nebraska and maybe all the way into Iowa. The bulk of it, however, heads into Kansas. And for Tuesday, we see a winter storm pushing through Oklahoma, the Ozarks, and Arkansas. Looks like a lot of rain to the south. Not too sure about potential in North Texas and the Red River. Then going into midweek, here it is. Here's the core of the Arctic air. Of course, at this point, it's heavily modified, but the center of it located across Minnesota into South Dakota for Wednesday morning. Another Pacific weather system coming onshore, and that will be crossing the Rockies later on Wednesday into Thursday. We're still trying to dislodge that cold air across the Great Lakes on Thursday. Then we'll see a gradual warm-up going into next week. And the patterns going into next weekend, they look a little bit less severe. And you can see that much of it is in the form of rain, even in Montana. So this represents a moderation of this severe weather pattern that we've been seeing. And that's all for this episode of Forecast Lab. If you want to catch our private Monday show, head over to Patreon and get signed up. And of course, that will help support the program. Those of you who are supporting the program, it is very much appreciated. Hope you have a great weekend. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.